What goes bump in the night is normally scary and bad, and this story is no exception. I'm going to tell you about a sickening story about the Night Walker. And as always, this one is very disgusting and depraved, just like the others, but this one sometimes takes it to the edge, and sometimes I can't even read it and look at it. But viewer discretion is advised. Born February 29th, 1960, Ricardo Ramirez is the youngest of 5 children. His father was a railway laborer and an abusive alcoholic. He would abuse his children and his wife. Ramirez was raised to be a Catholic, but at the age of 10 he started smoking marijuana. And psychiatrics said he was a made psychopath and not a born psychopath. His antisocial disorder contributed to the lack of sympathy for the torture he did to his victims. Ramirez was knocked unconscious and almost died multiple times by the age of 6. That developed temporal lobe epilepsy, aggressiveness, and hypersexuality. And at the age of 12, Ramirez's older cousin took him under his wing. And his cousin was an evil person also. He would murder and sexually assault people in Vietnam when he was a soldier out there. Ramirez recalled that he loved the stories of his cousin telling him how he would torture and sexually assault victims out there. Very sick and disgusting things. His cousin taught him military skills, stealthiness, and the kill tactics. That all contributed into Ramirez's later crime spree. Ramirez would want to escape his abusive father, so he'd sleep in the cemetery, and his father would tie him to a crucifix and leave him in the cemetery at night as a punishment. After he turned 14, he started using LSD. Him and his cousin got even closer by their bond of drug use. And at that time, Ramirez became fascinated and interested in Satanism and the occult. He was also into other sick things like murder and torture. And during high school, he got a job at a local Holiday Inn, and he'd use his master key to rob sleeping customers. And on at least one occasion, he sexually assaulted 2 children in the elevator at the hotel. Like I said, sick and disgusting things. It's a very hard story to get through, I'm gonna be honest, but the sick acts were never reported or prosecuted. He was fired from the job for attempting to sexually assault a woman in one of the hotel rooms until her husband came in, caught him in the act, and beat him. But the charges were dropped because the couple was from out of state and they didn't want to have to come back to Texas to testify. Ramirez was also there when his cousin murdered his own wife, and Ramirez later recalled that he thought the murder was fascinating. After the shooting, Ramirez became distant from his Ramirez became distant from his own family and peers, and his cousin was found not guilty due to his PTSD from military service. Ramirez dropped out of school in 9th grade in 1975. He then moved in with his older sister and her husband. And her husband was known as a peeping Tom, so he would take Ramirez to go peep and spy on women through their windows. Once his cousin was released in 1977 from the mental hospital, he would often go with them to peep on women through their windows. How many times do I have to say this is sickening? I can't drive it home enough. These people are deranged and sickening. Like I said, and in 1982, Ramirez moved to California, and that was a place he stayed and did all of the rest of his sickening acts. He also began to use cocaine, and he began to do burglaries and theft to fuel his drug addiction. He was living nomadically from Los Angeles to San Francisco from his time in California. He had no permanent residence, and on April 10th, 1984, Ramirez committed his first murder, and it's the most sickening murder in my opinion. I won't go into great details because I will tell you it made me cry and I broke down a little bit reading it. So I'm going to spare you the details. But she was a 10-year-old, a Chinese American girl named Mei Lung. It happened in the basement of her apartment building. She was looking for her lost $1 bill with her 8-year-old brother. That's when Ramirez approached her and said, "Come to the basement with him so they can find it." And that's when he did the sickening acts, killing May. But the murder was not linked to Ramirez until 2009. June 28th, 1984, a 79-year-old woman was murdered in her apartment building. She was stabbed multiple times in the head, neck, and chest area. They later found the fingerprints of Ramirez from a screen removed from the window to get into the house. And on March 17th, 1985, Ramirez shot a woman with a .22 caliber pistol. Luckily, the woman put her hand over her head with her keys, and it ricocheted off the keys. But Ramirez didn't know that. He thought she was dead, so she played dead until Ramirez left. But her roommate heard the commotion, and when she heard and figured out what happened, Ramirez was already in the house. And when she peeped around the corner, he shot her in the head, leaving it a fatal wound. He continued the sickening cycle for over a year. And on August 24th, 1985, Ramirez traveled south of LA to Mission Viejo in a stolen orange Toyota. He arrived at the home of a 45-year-old James Romero Jr. Romero just got back from a family vacation in Mexico. Romero's 13-year-old son was still awake while everyone else was sleeping. He went out to the truck to grab a pillow that he left in the car. And when he went out there, the truck was locked, but he heard rustling noises. He thought it was an animal, so he checked it out, but nothing was out of the ordinary. So the boy went back into the garage. Working on his mini bike, he heard the footsteps of Ramirez. And so he thought it was a stalker. So he went to alert his parents, and he saw Ramirez outside of his window. And when they chased Ramirez out, he booked it. And Romero's kid found and described the vehicle, orange Toyota, and he also saw partial parts of the license plate. And with his failed attempt, he then broke into a 30-year-old man's house, Bill Carnes, and his fiancée, 29-year-old Inez Erickson. He entered the house through the back door. He went into the couple's room, and he cocked his .25 caliber pistol, which woke up Carnes. And he then shot Carnes in the head 3 times. And then he turned his attention to Erickson. He then identified himself as the Night Stalker. He then forced her to say she loves Satan. And then he bound her with neckties from their closet. He then drug her into another room and sexually assaulted her. He robbed the room that they were in. And then he demanded jewelry and cash. And then he made her swear on Satan that there was no more that she was hiding. And while he was leaving the house, he said, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." Once Ramirez was gone, Erickson untied herself and ran to a neighbor's house to call for help. Surgeons miraculously were able to remove 2 of the 3 bullets in Carnes' head, and he miraculously lived from those injuries. Erickson gave a detailed description of her attacker, and they also got footprints from Romero's house. And the Toyota that Ramirez stole to use and drive was found in Koreatown in LA, abandoned. And investigators and police found a single fingerprint on the rear view mirror of the car, despite Ramirez wiping it clean thoroughly of any fingerprints. But he left 1 fingerprint, and that 1 fingerprint tied him to everything. And it was described as a near miracle because the system used to identify criminals with the fingerprints was recently installed, and it only dated back to people born January 1st, 1960 and after, only a couple months before Ramirez was born. And on August 29th, 1985, police released a mugshot of Ramirez from a prior arrest to the media. Police then said, "We know who you are now, and soon everybody else will. There will be no place you can hide." The next day, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona, but he didn't know his face was plastered everywhere on the news in California. And once he arrived in Tucson, Arizona, his brother wasn't home, so he came back to California. And once he arrived, he walked past police officers searching for him. And he tried to get on another bus to flee, but it didn't work. He also went into a convenience store, and a group of elderly Hispanic women saw him and frantically said, "That's El Matador." He then saw his face on a newspaper. It called him Invasor Nocturno, meaning night invader in English. He then ran across the freeway trying to carjack a Ford Mustang. He then ran across the street and tried to steal the keys from Angelina de la Torre. Her husband, Manuel de la Torre, witnessed it, and he hit Ramirez in the head with a fence post. A group of about 10 people formed and chased Ramirez down, and they soon restrained him and beat him relentlessly. Police were called, and they took Ramirez into custody. Ramirez was charged with 13 counts of murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death by gas chamber. And after the verdict, he said to the reporters, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." On June 7th, 2013, Ramirez died of B-cell lymphoma. May he never rest in peace. I hope y'all enjoyed this story. It was very sickening, very hard to get through. I'm a little under the weather right now, but I appreciate everybody coming in, and I hope y'all have a great holidays. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, leave it a like, comment, tell me which one I should do next, what I should do better, and subscribe if you want to. If not, I fully understand. And as always, chat, stay safe and good night.